Hearken close, friends, for the children of the Crescent Moon descend deeper into the forgotten crypt, where stone walls weep memory, lost voices stir, and knowledge itself demands a price. Ah, but it has been some time since we last gathered, has it not? Forgive me, dear friends, a bard's life is ever called to far-flung halls and whispered courts. But tonight, here among you, let me weave the next chapter, and know this, it shall be longer than any told before, for much has passed since we last spoke of the children of the Crescent Moon. When last we left them, the party stood poised at the threshold of darkness, the great mosaic having fallen away to reveal a spiral stair plunging into shadow. Step by cautious step, they descended, their world above fading until only stone and silence remained. At the foot of the stairs stretched a long hallway, ending at a colossal door set into the eastern wall, a door 10 feet wide, fashioned entirely into the visage of a screaming skull. Wind torches burned with an eerie blue light, casting flickering shadows across the door's grotesque features. Deep, empty eye sockets, a hollow nose too dark for the glow to penetrate, and a gaping maw lined with bone-white teeth. The keen-eyed ranger spotted something curious. One of the lower molars was missing, replaced instead by a keyhole barely large enough to notice. After some thought, they placed the obsidian medallion into a shallow socket near the bridge of the skull's nose, yet no mechanism stirred. Turning next to the small obsidian key, they fitted into the hidden molar gap, and with a slow, grinding twist, the skull shuddered. A latch released, the medallion and key retrieved just in time as the mouth clamped shut. With a low, tremulous moan, the massive door swung inward. A whisper, or was it a scream, echoed faintly in the passage behind them. Yet the children, whether out of wisdom or fear, chose not to speak of it. Beyond, they found not rest, but a grand funerary chamber, its vaulted ceiling vanishing into the darkness above. Along the walls stood solemn statues of robed mourners, each bowed low in endless grief. The faces were hidden deep within cowls, yet their hollow eyes seemed to drink in the light itself. Some clasped their hands in silent prayer, others stretched hands outward in supplication. It was a sorrow beyond death, a mourning for something lost not merely to life, but to memory itself. At the chamber's heart stood a dais atop which lay multiple sarcophagi, unmarked, undisturbed, yet brooding with silent threat. 3 ways led onward, an open arch to the east, a closed door to the southwest, and behind them, the door through which they had come, now closing silently, sealing them in. Thus wrapped, the children moved cautiously, searching for a sign or secret. Upon the southern wall, they managed to find a stone relief, head-robed figure clutching a blank book. Additionally, near the central sarcophagus, they spied a faint engraving, a short sword piercing parchment, mirroring the medallion's ancient sigil. Sensing magic about the relief, the artificer pressed parchment against the carved book, and hidden words revealed themselves. Knowledge sought, not stolen. Whisper thy query, and wisdom be given. And so, with grave peril thick in the air, and ancient secrets pressing close, the artificer, may not quite as grave, whispered, "What is the purpose of this room?" Much to the disbelief of his companions, the chamber shuddered violently. Dust exhaled from the mouths of the mourning statues. The walls rippled like disturbed waters, and the scholar's carving fractured, light spilling through widening cracks. With a final growing sigh, the illusion fell away. Where once stood statues in stone, now towering bookshelves loomed. The funerary chamber was no tomb at all. It was a hidden library, a sanctuary of knowledge lost to time. The air grew thick with the scent of ancient parchment and ink. The flickering torchlight gleamed off gilded tomes and crumbling scrolls. The children stood in awe, for the antechamber, as they later named it, was a trove unlike they had yet seen. Among their discoveries, they uncovered some treasures. 20 gold coins gleaming amid the dust, a scroll yet to be deciphered, and an amulet, modest, but untouched by time. And, of greater import, they found an ancient tome bound in blackened leather entitled The Obsidian Order's Silent War. Within, they found fragmented records, references to a dire force, and to a calamity called the Veil of Unmaking, an event said to have erased entire archives of knowledge. The Order had fought desperately to preserve scraps of truth, yet even this tome bore away a torn page. And next to the tome, they found a brutal scroll hidden behind false bindings, titled The Name That Should Not Exist, bearing haunting phrases. The first phrase was written like this: "There was once a name spoken only in whispers, but now it has been erased. To name it is to call it is to bind fate to ruin." While the second was written like this: "Stars would weep, the earth will crack, and the sky shall hold no memory of what came before." However, within that scroll, one line appears to have been deliberately smudged, as though even reading it could summon doom. They shared a wary glance, the unspoken dread thick between them, before carefully tucking their findings into the bag of holding and pressing onward into the dark. Crossing the threshold through the eastern archway, the cleric was assailed by a shadow. Not merely darkness, but something alive and grasping, whose chilling strike nearly brought him to his knees before his companions and he drove it away. Using caution, they explored southward instead and found a smaller chamber dominated by a single, massive mausoleum, a monument of black stone, its surface etched with shifting, unreadable glyphs. Strange, scratching noises echoed from within, rhythmic and deliberate. The druid, listening intently, began to mimic the strange pattern upon the cold stone surface. At his final tap, the mausoleum responded, but not with violence, with an eerie, creeping stillness instead. The air itself grew heavy, and with a faint shimmer, the mausoleum's door dissolved like mist at dawn. Only then did they see no corpse lay within. Where a body should have rested, there was nothing, only emptiness that bent the space around it, revealing a stair spiraling downward into darkness. The chamber shifted subtly, the walls stretched higher, their carvings twisted into new patterns. No longer a place of mourning, but of passage. The illusion was shattered. The False Sepulcher became a doorway to a lower chamber, yet wisdom held their hands. Though the dark stair called them with whispers of forgotten secrets, the children of the Crescent Moon chose caution, vowing first to unravel all of the mysteries of this level before daring the deeper descent. And so, with heavy hearts and wary glances, they parted ways. The druid and the cleric turned eastward, retracing steps through the dust-choked halls, while the ranger, rogue, artificer and fighter pressed westward and southward, deeper into the unseen. There, among the winding passages, yet more secrets stirred, waiting to be unearthed. For within the next room, the larger group found a broken hourglass upon a pedestal, its delicate glass shattered and sand frozen mid-air, which, when touched, reformed itself into an hourglass that contained a leather-bound tome, not sand, and a whispered voice that said, "What was lost is now found. What was forgotten is now remembered." Meanwhile, the cleric and the druid wandered deeper into the forgotten halls where silence hung thick as dust upon stone. They found themselves standing among rows of nameless headstones, the final resting places of those long erased from memory. Against the far wall, half buried in shadow, they discovered a weathered stone tablet, upon which was etched a simple yet haunting phrase: "To reveal is to remember." Drawn by instinct, the druid reached out and traced a faint, crumbling name upon one of the worn headstones. And as soon as the last speck of dust was cleared from that name, the chamber shivered in response. Slowly, impossibly, The grave markers began to shift, softening, reshaping, until they rose up as towering shelves, laden with ancient books and forgotten scrolls. The Hall of Elders had woken at last, and among its shelves they found 5 gold pieces, a cracked sapphire gemstone, another unidentified spell scroll, and a midnight blue tome called the Book of Broken Stars. And within they found references to something called the Severance, and they called it a moment when celestial bodies vanished from memory itself. Who knows, maybe it is related to the Veil. Other references recorded the Obsidian Order's desperate attempts to capture the phenomenon, or their records too were erased. But the Hall of Elders was not their only test. Their steps carried them onward until at last the druid and the cleric found themselves trapped within a featureless stone chamber, its walls smooth and bare, its exits lost to illusion. The silence was oppressive and the air was stale, as if the room itself had been sealed away from the world for an eternity. And yet the danger still lingered, for careful steps revealed treacherous pit traps hidden near opposite corners of the room, gaping mouths of darkness waiting patiently for a single careless misstep. However, as they edged forward, faint words began to appear, etched in ghostly script across the bare walls. They said, "What was hidden shall again be found." Puzzling over their meaning, the druid and the cleric recalled the knowledge that they had found, and speaking aloud the title of one of their recovered tomes, they offered the room its forgotten truth. At their words, the stone itself seemed to breathe. Faint seams of light traced across the walls, and with a rippling shudder, the hidden doorways emerged from the featureless stone. The chamber of sealed truths had not been a dead end, but a trial, and they had passed. As the two regrouped, the larger party pressed deeper into the winding passages, their steps cautious yet determined. And it was there, at a shadowed bend in the hall, that danger struck once more. From the gloom behind them, 2 skeletal figures lunged, a rattling of ancient bones lost amid the sudden clash of steel. Though the attack was swift, the children of the Crescent Moon responded swifter still, felling the undead foes before they could inflict lasting harm. Breathing heavily, they pressed onward, and soon entered a somber chamber where a great wall of names was etched into the cold stone, stretching from one end to the other in endless, fading rows. With a wary glance among themselves, the children began to speak the names aloud, and the stone itself seemed to listen. From the wall, as if pulled by the very bones of memory, came whispered fragments of prophecy. The first response was called the Fall of Myth Drenor, and it stated, "The wards failed, the mythal cracked, and the once unbreakable bastion of the elves crumbled under shadow and steel." They tried the name again, and once again the wall replied anew. It replied with, "What was shattered once may be shattered again. Not all ruins stay buried, nor do all betrayals remain in the past." Another name echoed in the hollow air, and this time the response came back, "The Lost Edicts of Ambin." And then, more ominous still, "When the sky fractures and the stars weep silver fire, the tide of ruin shall rise unchallenged. In that hour, the forgotten ones shall return, bound by fate, unshackled by time. The children of the Crescent Moon shall walk once more, and in their hands shall rest the final choice, to mend what was broken, or to burn away the last light of the world." And yet the wall was not done, for they spoke the name again, just to be sure, and it replied with, "A path stands open, unseen by most. Across the veil of shattered stars lies a world not yet lost. But to reach it, one must first remember its name." Among the dust and crumbling stone, they managed to uncover some additional treasure. Several coins scattered, gleaming faintly in the torchlight, forgotten scrolls, and a small handful of gemstones worn smooth by time. Yet the echoes of the past still called to them. Having gathered themselves and venturing south, the druid and the cleric entered a somber chamber, cloaked in dust and webs. At its heart stood a cracked stone altar, and slumped over it, skeletal remains of a lone figure, frozen forever in the act of writing. As they approached, the skeleton stirred, not to attack, but to dip its ancient quill into a dry ink pot and scrawl a question across the altar's worn surface. The question was, what is the price of knowledge? But under pressure, the druid fumbled his first answer, and unseen forces gripped the cleric in a stifling hold. Realizing the gravity of the riddle, they thought carefully and then spoke once more the true answer, for the answer to the riddle was memory. At the word, the skeletal figure nodded imperceptibly, and with a final exhale of ancient dust, crumbled into nothingness. The altar shifted, revealing a hidden compartment containing a preserved scroll and a scattering of gold coins. All around them, the chamber itself transformed, and shelves emerged from the stone walls, laden with scrolls and forgotten tomes, though none were immediately useful. But the scholar's vigil had ended, his final lesson now given. Yet even this was not the end of their trials. Westward they ventured once more, finding themselves in a chamber lined with rows of ancient wooden racks. Their frames splintered and leaning, the scent of mildew and rot thickened the air. It was a graveyard of forgotten lore, and whatever these shelves once held had long since withered into dust. Yet faint whispers drifted through the silence, circling the broken shelves, fragmented phrases repeating over and over, begging to be remembered. Patiently, the children listened, piecing together their broken echoes, and when at last they whispered their remembered words back into the air, the chamber shivered. The empty racks softened and reformed into rows of scrolls, memory crystals, and delicate tomes bound in fading silver thread. The vault of whispers had awoken, no longer a tomb of silence, but a library of lost voices, restored at last. Amid the reclaimed archives they found a modest treasure, a spellbook of lesser magics, another ancient scroll, and an assortment of bookmarks woven with gold leaf. Yet, even this was not the heart of the mystery they sought. And so they sought out the rest of the group, hoping that they had had more success. They pressed westward once more, and at last found the rest of the group in a room that contained a long, dust-choked table, where half-finished notes and scattered parchment whispered of secrets still waiting to be pieced together. Piece by piece the children worked to refill the missing words, weaving the broken knowledge into coherent sentences containing the following phrases. The first: on the eve of the binding, the final vow was spoken, but the seal did not take. Without the true name, the oath remained undone, and thus the bargain still lingers, waiting to be claimed. The second: beyond the last markers, where the veil is thinnest, the path reveals itself only to those who carry the medallion of the passage. Without it, the way remains forever sealed. The third: the halls were built not to store wisdom, but to protect it. Those who sought the deepest truths were warned. Once the words were spoken, the price cannot be undone. The fourth: a ruler of stone and silence, abandoned but not forgotten. Their name was struck from the records, yet still the echoes remain. To awaken the past, one must first restore the name of the fallen king. And the last: when the last link falls, the cycle will end. Until then, the weight remains, binding all who bear it. But beware, the final chain is not of metal, but of memory. As they wrote the last word and it fell into place, the scattered parchments rose into the air, swirling like a storm of forgotten memory. From their whirling dance, a great tome took shape, crashing heavily onto the table. It was called the Index of Tomes. Onward they all pressed, through maze-like hallways, only to be ambushed by a creature of nightmare, a gibbering mouther, all mouths and madness. The battle was fierce, and confusion was threatening to shatter their cohesion, but it was the ranger, with a wild, desperate blow of his rapier, who delivered a killing strike, severing the creature's body in two. Despite the fumble, it was quite impressive how a piercing weapon could do that, considering it's nothing more than a bona fide knitting needle. Weary, bloodied, But unbowed, the children pressed deeper. Through twists and turns they came to what seemed a dead end, yet the wall before them felt wrong, as though it waited for some key not yet revealed. And there, my friends, we must pause this tale, though I ask, what lies beyond the hidden gate? What horrors or truths wait in the deep below? But these are questions for another night, and thus fades this chapter into whispered memory. Yet the tale of the Crescent Moon marches ever onward, etched in shadow, starlight, and fate.